Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Gosia Pytel. I'm originally from Poland and I'm an instructional designer and design thinking mentor with various organizations. I go around and kind of consult and offer my expertise on how to lean processes and make sure that design thinking is used and the power of design thinking is actually used through the experiments and through the processes. So today I would like to invite you to have a little insight into how to make your instructional design better through design thinking. For those who don't know, design thinking is a human-centered, creative, and open-minded problem-solving methodology. This is sort of the shortest in my definition for making sure that all the important aspects, without really getting into details, are expressed in a definition. Behind design thinking, there are actually two parts that constitute its success. And one of them are mindsets that kind of create the area of how to use design thinking outside of the process, but how to actually get into this design thinking mindsets. And then the other part is the process. And I put the process in brackets because you'll see that it's not very that linear. You'll see that it can be stretched to how it needs to be used for a certain organization. So just to make it a bit easier, let's start with the process. And just to compare, this is the most popular ADDIE model for instructional design. This is something that I based my work on, and it's something that I know my fellow instructional designers will know how to use that comparison. So you can see that you go through analyzing training needs through design, developing, implementation, and evaluation. And then between analyze and evaluate, you'll see that there is sort of a back and forth relationship when you can actually evaluate how training performs and then analyze how it performs and then use those insights to sort of change and make sure that you can adjust it. Well, let's take a look at design thinking. The basic process, obviously there are different versions of it by now, but the basic process has 5 stages as well, and it goes from empathizing through definition, ideation, prototyping, and testing. But what kind of separates this from the ADDIE process would be the relationship between each step. So there's the same sort of relationship between testing and prototyping. This is usually many iterations when you would test and prototype your training and your materials. But in addition to that, you can actually go back from testing, and if it doesn't work, you can not only go back to prototyping, but you can also go back to ideate and figure out new ideas to actually fulfill the need and solve the problem. But you can also go back to definition, make sure that you actually have all that information and definition correct. And that's not even it. It kind of gets a little more complicated in the graph version, because you can make those relationships and you can follow those ties in between pretty much every stages. Even if you go back to testing, it doesn't mean that you're not going back to empathizing if it doesn't work, because if your findings are wrong to start with, the entire process won't work. Obviously, going step by step with design thinking, this situation happens very, very early, because if you follow empathizing and definition and ideation, you'll most probably arrive at something that will never go back to empathizing, because you'll have your findings and your research. So just to kind of start and give you ideas on how you can use it for your better instructional design, we'll go stage by stage as well, but just keep in mind that they do intertwine as well. So with empathizing, this is not only analyzing the needs, but it's analyzing the learner. So obviously the analyze from ADDIE analyzes the needs for the training, but empathizing goes back to the people that will use the training, goes back to how they will use it, what they need, and actually what is their usage of planned training and how they will benefit from it. So to make sure that this happens, you usually would be inclined to be in your learner's shoes. So you would try to experience their feelings and emotions and take into consideration how they live, what influences their minds, and how those influences are formed. Because obviously, even for the same position, if you're preparing, say, training for call centers, then the first line agent will have different needs and different sort of a business life as opposed to their manager or the supervisor. And even within the first line agents, they will differ how they actually call and talk to their clients, and you need to take all of this into consideration when you're planning to create something for them, because obviously it needs to resonate with them. In addition to that, empathizing kind of makes you find their positives and their frustrations. So if you know how to match it with the training and you know what their frustration is, you can avoid them. If you know what their positives are, you know what to focus on. And even if you want to avoid and focus on something, you also can use those findings to create learning experiences as well. How you can actually achieve this? Well, first of all, create specific personas for your learners. Something that will represent the learner. It's not only finding out what their age is, and it's not only finding out their education. It's actually creating like an example persona for your training. So it's something that will have their family ties. It will have their life motto. It will have their frustrations. It will have a catchphrase that will let you figure out how to engage them in your learning. You can use mind maps, which we probably all know and love, but you can use them to map their worlds, as in what influences them, what are their frustrations again, how they think and what they think. And then following that, you can fill out an empathy map, which is just a graphical representation of what they think, what they say, what they do, what they hear, how they behave. So if you can actually step into your learner's shoes and fill those elements, you will have pretty much the entire puzzle solved on how to create something not only to fulfill the need for the training, but actually fulfill the need of the learner. And those can be two different things. Then when you have your findings from your empathy stage and you know who you're tackling, you know who you're talking to, you're pretty sure that you have your learner figured out, it's time to define the problem. And it's actually the idea of defining the real problem and not the problem that is passed to us as instructional designers from managers. Or you probably all were in a situation when the training need that was discussed with you was not really the real problem of why people were not performing or why people were not able to do their job. And this is where the stage comes in. It's to make sure that you're solving the real problem. So using your findings from empathy and using emotions that actually are behind the learner, you can dig deeper and you can find what the real problem is. You can kind of try to get into the gist of it and sort of go layer by layer as in an onion or Shrek. And you need to define the reality instead of an imaginary situation that will come from your manager. And to be able to do that, first of all, it's the simplest technique is to ask why. And then when you get an answer, you ask why to that answer. And then you go deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's sort of based on an inquisitive mind of a child. When you engage in a conversation and the child will ask, but why? And then you'll try to explain, but it doesn't really solve their problem. It doesn't really go to the gist of it. So they'll ask, but why? And then you need to explain in more details. And then if you go step by step and you go to the root of the problem, then using empathy and using this information, you can actually rephrase that from the perspective of the learner and using the idea of the real problem. So with empathy and definition, you will arrive at the stage of having a pretty good idea of what you're designing and why you're designing it and what you need to include to make it relatable and to make it resonate with your learner. So it's time to ideate, and this will be more the development of the training when you're trying to find out ideas on how to solve that problem. And it's not only sort of figuring out what information to put in the training, but it's also the part of figuring out how to put it and how to actually match it with their emotions, with their state, with what they think and what they do and what they can actually afford in their jobs. The key to it is to produce many ideas to find the really, really good one. And it's not only about using particular components in instructional design. It's not only about using the particular learning styles and taking this into consideration, but it's also about putting a different spin on it, putting a sort of a spin that will resonate with your learner. to be able to do that, you will focus on quantity of the ideas, and then also make sure that there is a little bit of crazy, because craziness sparks creativity. And then if you hear someone saying something that is out of this world, you may think yourself that, oh well, you know, possibilities are endless. And with the crazy ones, you'll at the end of the day be able to go in and fish out the ones that are actually pretty cool. But then sometimes you won't be able to arrive at those if you didn't really venture into the craziness. Usually this stage is connected with prototyping and putting those ideas out in the world. And ideally in design thinking, we wouldn't really include any judgment at the stage of ideation. It'll be more just presenting ideas. We don't want to quench this thirst for creativity. But at this stage, it might be hard in instructional design to kind of communicate those ideas and make sure that you're going the right path, including managers and including all the stakeholders that need to be informed. So this one, unfortunately, in instructional design will have a little bit of judgment, but it's staying away from this silly judgment of people saying just things as in, oh, that's crazy, or this will never work. If it's constructive criticism, yes, at this stage in this role you would accept it and make sure that you build your idea around it. But if it's just a silly judgment, just kind of put it away and don't think about that. And to make sure that you can arrive at that stage, be sure to brainstorm. Even if you think you're not a visual person, standing up, getting away from your desk and actually using post-it notes in various colors. It might seem silly, it may kind of feel like you're going back to your university days, but it actually sort of inspires the different parts of your brain that you wouldn't use normally when you sit in front of your desk. It kind of forces your brain to exercise that creativity muscle. If you have the possibility, if you have different people on your team, engage cross-disciplinary teams. Different points of view will give you different ideas, and this wide array of ideas will again give you something to choose from. Encourage that craziness and wear different hats as well. Again, the more points of view you will get on your project, the better understanding you will have and the better array of choosing different options you will have. Considering that we're now at the stage of ideation and at the stage of producing ideas, at this level, at the end of it, you should have a pretty nice idea of what you're trying to include in your training and how you're trying to do it and to achieve it. So it's sort of like the development stage. It's just more about being crazy, and it's more about not maybe developing the material as linear as you would do normally, just kind of getting crazy and getting around different ideas and testing and seeing how they work. The next stage kind of goes together with the last stage as well, and it's the prototyping and testing stage. And it's all about encouraging positive product development. You can do prototype, and obviously you'll be doing that prototype separately, but then you'll be testing it and going back to prototyping and testing and prototyping. And this is the usual situation that will occur if your research and your empathizing and your problem definition and your ideation was done based on the previous information. Then this will be the moment when you will be going back and forth to actually build quickly and make sure that you can fail quickly as well and introduce feedback. So that's exactly what it is. It's building quickly and failing quickly. It's much better to create many prototypes that are not maybe fully functional, but to make sure at this stage that you're not going the wrong direction. Those stages are great for getting feedback, and this feedback it shouldn't be something that will stop the project and stop the development. It should be something that will make the product better, and it's something that you will implement to accommodate to the learner. At this level, even if you find out that you need to go back to different stages, don't be afraid to it. It's better to go back to the start and empathize again and actually create great product that people will love than just stick to those phases and stick to development and implementation, even if you don't really feel fully that the product will be a success. You can achieve this by making quick prototypes, and currently there is a lot of applications that even if you can't pay for those, they usually would give you like a possibility to create 1 or 2 prototypes. So even if you, as an instructional designer, if you use Adobe Creative Cloud and you do your graphics, then you'll have access to Adobe XD when you can quickly create prototypes. You can use Sketch or Figma that will give you collaboration as well. And this is crucial to actually create something that might not have the best graphics in the world, but actually will have the interaction behind it and will show how the product will work. And that's when you get that feedback, and that's when you can actually see that a feature will fail. But then instead of building the entire coursework, then you can change it, and you can change the component, you can add something, you can change the learning style. So this is extremely crucial. Okay, so we kind of went through every single stage, and now you know how it differs from the basic EDI process and how you can use those insights to make your instructional design better. But as I mentioned at the very beginning, that's not it. As I mentioned, there are mindsets and processes. We went through the process, but I also mentioned those mindsets. And part of design thinking is following the process, yes, and it's going through those stages. But a very, very big part of it is the approach that you have to it. It's very important to have certain ideas behind it so you don't get stuck or you don't get discouraged along the way. And this is what distinguishes design thinking from instructional design. In design thinking, you'll have this set of mindsets, and then depending on who you talk to, you might add or change those mindsets as well. So I'll just give you the 5 that I think are the most important to actually have positive and creative approach to instructional design and design thinking as well, and really in general all work that you do. So the first one would be the focus on human values. As mentioned, it's a human-centered methodology. It's not only about the training need, but it's about what the learner would need with this training. So make sure that you always have your learner in mind. Go and talk to them as much as possible. Try to engage with them. Try to make sure that if the situation presents itself, they can come back and actually give feedback to you as well. The second one, well, it's okay to fail. If we don't fail, we don't learn. So it's better to actually create a working prototype and fail. Obviously, you can have feedback, and that's very valuable. But nothing tests the product as putting the working prototype out there and seeing how people use it and seeing how people interact with it. So to me, it's one of the most important mindsets. Experiment. We mentioned prototyping and testing, and we mentioned failing as well. Don't be afraid to experiment with different components. Don't be afraid to experiment with games or something that you might not feel is so much out there. Don't be afraid to change the content a little bit. Don't be afraid to maybe change the tone of the content, obviously depending on all your insights. But don't be so linear in your process, and don't just use Captivate and screens. Make sure that you venture out there and see what's out there, and make sure that you can include that in your training, because with experiments you can actually see what works and what doesn't work. So it's a big part of creating any product, really. Collaboration. Collaborate with your team, especially if you have access to multinational teams, and if you can actually get people from different countries. They will all have different outlooks on it. They will all behave differently and use the product differently. So as much as you can engage your team, or if it's possible, engage your clients as well, and that's even better. As much as you can engage people from different countries or different positions that actually usually focus on something completely different than you do, they will give you a set of completely different insights as well. The feedback won't be the same. There might be a couple of things that they will say that will be common for all of them, but in addition to that, you'll get different pieces of advice from different people. So it's crucial to have a multidisciplinary team that you can use, and then you can share your knowledge with and get insights from them as well. And then show and but don't tell. This goes well with feedback and prototyping and showing your prototype. Don't just kind of go in and explain everything step by step. Let people use your product. Let people use your training. Observe them how they do it. Explain to them what certain elements will do and how they will behave, but don't tell them what is expected of them to do and what is the expected outcome. Don't tell them what to do and how to use it, but show them what it is and let them experiment on their own and gather this feedback to make your product better. Those insights and this process is actually something that can help you develop not only better instructional design, better training, better creative materials, but it's something that you can actually use it in different areas of your work, not only in instructional design, but you can also apply them to your normal life as well. If you're interested in hearing more about this, and not only about how you can make instructional design better through design thinking, but also the other way around, how instructional design can make design thinking better, because there's a lot of insights and a lot of information we can actually take for design thinking and product design and service design as well. So if you're interested in hearing more, I welcome you to my website, and you can always contact me if you have any questions. So I'm more than willing to engage in that and also hear what you guys have to say and what do you think about design thinking. It's not a one-stop shop. It's not something that will fix all the problems, and that's something that we should accept as well. But if you can draw some inspiration from design thinking to make your instructional design better, that's when it's already a success. Thank you so much for listening. Take a look at my website and reach out to me if you have any more questions. Thank you so much. Bye!